Hi, my name is Stephen White and I used to work in Carlisle Library, and I'm just going to give a short talk about the Quintinshill railway disaster that happened on the 22nd of May 1915. Here we have the bald facts of it. On that date, a southbound troop train crashed into a stationary train outside the signal box at Quintinshill, and then an overnight sleeper crashed into these two trains, killing 227 passengers and members of the Royal Scots Regiment. This is the greatest number of fatalities in any railway accident in Great Britain. How could this possibly have happened? Let's just set the scene first of all. Where is Quintinshill? Quintinshill is just north of Gretna, about 9 miles north of Carlisle. It's on the main Glasgow-Carlisle railway. When you leave on the train today, it takes about 8 or 9 minutes north of Carlisle. You whiz past the scene of the worst accident. You can actually see it from the Quintinshill bridge, which is just north of the site. There's another context, however. What was happening in 1915? 1915 was the second year of the Great War. The railways were under tremendous pressure for various reasons. Everything moved by train, munitions, men's, apart from the normal day-to-day traffic. On top of this, 100,000 railwaymen had actually volunteered for the forces. So the railways were short, they were under pressure. Right, let's start the night before the accident, the 21st of May 1915. The man on the left, Meakin, was the signalman. He comes on duty at the Quintinshill box, which is on the right. His shift goes from 8 o'clock until 6 o'clock in the morning. The next player on the scene, London Euston. At 12 o'clock, already 4 hours into Meakin's shift, the overnight sleeper is about to depart from London Euston to Glasgow. We now leap forward again, 3:42, Larbert, Scotland. The 1st 7th Royal Scots Territorial Battalion has been training there and is about to entrain south. They don't know it, but they're going to Liverpool. They don't know it, but they're going to Gallipoli. This is the train they were on, Caledonian number 121. It's piloted by 2 Carlisle men, Scott and fireman Hannah. We leap forward now to 6:10 and another train. This is the number 907, a local train at the Citadel station. This departed at 6:10 and was a stopping train at every station on the way to Beatuck. Normally, the sleepers would have passed through Carlisle before this train departed the city, but as often happens, the sleeper was late, so it was decided to let this local train go ahead first, and then it would be shunted into a siding at one of the stations. This is the day signalman, Tinsley. Tinsley was to come on duty at 6 o'clock. He, however, had entered into an informal arrangement with Meakin, the other signalman, that he would actually start work half an hour later. This suited him, he got more time in bed. It also allowed him, who was living in Gretna, to get a lift up to the box on the train. This was against the rules of the Caledonian Railway, but things were perhaps rather lax. So he is actually on this local train. Late coming into Carlisle. This is number 48, piloting number 148. These are Caledonian engines because they change onto Caledonian metals. Departs Carlisle, hoping to make up a little time, knowing that the local train is ahead of it, but is going to be put into a siding at Quintinshill. Now, Quintinshill, if you go up today, this is what you see. The box would be in the distance, that's been demolished, but the setup is exactly the same today. You can see the lines, the loops, and here you can actually see, looking from the Quintinshill bridge south, the main line with the 2 loops north and south. They're still in use. You can see a mainline train there, and again goods, petrol wagons being shunted into the siding. So a vertical view, this is what it actually looks like. There's the signal box at the top. You can see the down line to London, the up line to Glasgow, and the 2 loops. On this particular morning, the situation is this. The two loops are occupied by an empty coal train and a goods train. So when the local comes onto the scene, this is what they do with it. It is now facing in the direction of the London trains. It's on the wrong line, you might say. This was done infrequently, but it wasn't unusual. 4 times in the previous 6 months the train had been put into that position because of the heavy use of traffic. What you have to remember is, to the north there is the signal box. A big glass window looks onto the line. The signalman who's just coming onto duty, Tinsley, travelled up on that train. He's just got off the train. He's gone into the box. This is what the box looks like. It's occupied by Tinsley and by other railwaymen. Meakin is there, and 1 or 2 other men from the freight trains chatting away. They shouldn't be in the box. They would be a distraction, and really they should have left. But it was common practice for them to huddle around the fire, discussing the war news, no doubt. And also, Tinsley had bought the newspaper, so they would be reading that. This is a key factor now. Tinsley was supposed to come on duty at 6 o'clock. He's actually coming on duty at 6:30. All the railway movements of the trains between 6 and 6:30, Meakin had written on a separate sheet of paper. Tinsley then had to copy these into the railway register into his own hand to falsify the record. His attention is distracted probably because he's keen to do that. The lever, which will signal that the line is clear for southbound trains, allowing that southbound troop train to pass. There was a provision to safeguard the trains. Collars were put around the levers so that if you forgot, you couldn't pull the lever to accept the train, but that wasn't used. So we're not sure who the signalman was, whether it was Meakin or Tinsley, but they accepted the troop train from the north. As far as the troop train was concerned, the line was clear. It's a beautiful, clear day at about 6:40 in the morning. And the signal is given that the line can accept that troop train. The result, a head-on collision. Death and destruction are thrown across both lines. And then, what chance would have it? The signalmen don't have the time to give the signal to the sleeper that there is danger and obstruction on the line. Only minutes later, the sleeper crashes in to the Holocaust that's already there. Its fuel is thrown across the line. All the engines, all the wagons are consumed in flames. These are photographs that were taken hours and hours after the event, and you can still see the smouldering wreckage. The Board of Trade report said that the force of this collision was such that the length occupied by the engine and 15 coaches of the troop train after the collision was only 67 yards, whilst the running length was 213 yards. People came from all over, some to Gorp, many to help. You can see the strength and the destruction of the fire. The injured and the wounded were taken into the adjoining fields. An ambulance train was brought from Carlisle, also from Carlisle. Cavan and Gray turned up bacon curers with coffins for the dead, a macabre moment. Little farmhouse at Quintinshill, which was hastily turned into an improvised mortuary. These are the Royal Scots who were lined up afterwards, the survivors of the crash. Only 58 fully fit members of the regiment could answer the roll call, except there was no roll call to answer. The roll had actually been burnt in the flames, and hence, even today, there is some doubt about how many actually died. Rifles were found all over the line. You can see one rifle, and there you can see the skeletal remains, the butt burnt through. The newspaper said, "What chance of escape could men and women have had from this fierce fire?" Sure, men were killed in the collision, but it was the fire really that did for them. And here again, because of the war, lots of old stock had been brought into use. Old wooden stock that was gaslit. There was a gas reservoir under the coach, which of course immediately took light and spread the flames. It was rumoured that trapped soldiers were shot by their officers. Whether that's true or not, who knows? The paper reported the accident. 42 bodies recovered. The news quickly spread to Edinburgh. The first 7th Royal Scots were essentially Leith men, and their drill hall, their headquarters, was the Dalmeny Hall. And there you can see on the left the relatives gathering to hear news, and on the right the hall today, still very recognisable. The death toll rose, 80 killed, 300 injured. And so it went on as the weeks passed. The 164th death is reported in the Cumberland News. Private James Wilson of the 1st 7th Royal Scots succumbed to his injuries at the Cumberland Infirmary. Universal grief at the loss of nearly 200 Royal Scots. 3 more deaths. Here's a photograph of some of the more lightly injured on the steps of the Cumberland Infirmary. Injured were also sent to the Fewshill Street War Hospital. And when you look at this photograph, you have to blink once or twice. This is a lighter moment in this tragedy because the nurses and the soldiers have swapped uniform. The men are dressed as women and the women are dressed in the soldiers' clothes. The driver, Scott, and Hannah, the fireman, were buried. They were Carlisle men, Caledonian men. And here you can see at the auxiliary hospital, Chadwick, which is Austin Friars School today, again some of the injured in the accident are lining up as a guard of honour as the cortege passes. And here you can see the cortege passing up Upperby Street, turning at the top towards Stanwick Cemetery, where both men are buried. And the headstone of James Hannah says, "Fireman of the troop train of the Gretna railway disaster, who was killed the 22nd of May 1915, aged 33. The main funeral was, of course, in Edinburgh. This is the cortege for over 100 Royal Scots who were buried there. It took 4 hours to pass the silent crowds. The newspaper reported the procession of carriages bearing the coffins took 3 hours to pass the silent crowds lining the streets which were incongruously festive for the Queen's birthday. A Scotsman reader protested on Monday, when every heart in the city was aching and many more breaking, Edinburgh was bright with flags, fluttering gaily top-mast high. There were the inevitable inquiries. There was a Board of Trade inquiry. There were inquests in England. And here you can see Tinsley proceeding to the inquest. And this is a photograph surreptitiously taken of the inquest. The inquest proceeded up to the Quintinshill box. They examined every angle. And this is a curious aspect because England and Scotland have different legal systems. The majority of the soldiers, of the casualties, were in Scotland, but many were also in England, taken to the Cumberland Infirmary where they died. So there was an inquest in England and also a court case in Scotland. In England, Tinsley and Meakin were found guilty of manslaughter. They were then charged in Scotland and tried at the High Court. And here you can see Meakin just about to enter the High Court. He was given 18 months for manslaughter. This is Tinsley. He was given 3 years. This is a photograph of him taken just before he was sent up to the Peterhead prison. It's a full-on view. In the mirror you can see the side view. His hands are across his chest. That's to see if there are any identifying tattoos. When in prison, Tinsley wrote this rather pathetic letter. "My heart is nearly broken. My poor old father is laid in bed these last 18 weeks and has taken it to heart. My oldest son of 12 years was wondering if he wrote to the king, would he pardon my father? I have prayed to God to help those whose sorrow I have caused by this accident. He actually petitioned the king that he could join the army and be sent to the front. He didn't serve the full term, neither did Tinsley, and they were released in 1916. Here you can see the Royal Scots. 100 of them were buried in this mass grave, 3 deep, Union Jacks across the top. And every year subsequently, the survivors of the Royal Scots, that accident, laid their wreaths and paid their respects. This is in the Rosebank Cemetery in Edinburgh, and here again you can see it today. And its full details are told there in memory of the officers and non-commissioned men of the 1st 7th Battalion, the Leith Territorials. Thought they were going to Gallipoli but never made it out of Scotland. There are several memorials there. On the left there is a mural that was done on Leith gable end showing the coffin procession, and more recently on the Dalmeny Hall, which was the battalion drill hall, an Australian artist has done this picture, this imagined picture of one of the survivors as an old man remembering, recalling. Up at Larbert, where the 1st 7th departed, a plaque has been involved recalling that. And also, of course, at Gretna, there is another plaque. There it is. And again, that remembers them. And it says the crash site is about half a mile from here, and it does actually overlook the crash site. But the nearest memorial is actually on the Quintinshill Bridge, right above the site. In 2015, again, there was a major memorial service held there. Nicola Sturgeon and members of the Scottish Parliament were there to pay their respects. There were one or two, finally, quirky elements to this case. Conspiracy theorists have come forward and said that, isn't it strange that both Tinsley and Meakin were afterwards, after they'd been released, re-employed on the railway. They said that's because they decided to take the blame and the railway paid them back by giving them a job. They claimed that Tinsley was actually unfit for work and was an epileptic. They claimed the railway knew about the improper practices. But one of the most unusual, startling, sad stories is surely this, that unbelievably 2 of the bodies were unclaimed. They're known as the lost children of Maryhill. These were on the passenger, the local train. Is it believable that nobody knew who they were, nobody came forward to bury them, nobody came forward to say these are our children? One just shakes one's head. This is in a Glasgow cemetery, the Glasgow Necropolis. And even more bizarrely and strangely, on the Rosebank Cemetery, let's go back there, all the men who died, their names are on the plaques. On the second bottom there, you will see the name of Henry MacDonald, one of the men who died in the Quintinshill railway disaster, except that he didn't. He's on the right there are 2 brothers. At the last moment, he was called away on a training exercise and wasn't on the train. How strange.